Well, fine. Now they're going to inherit all your lands and titles.
Joke's on them. I spent all that money on copies of Pirates Gold. And I buried them and gave them a small portion of a map and said...
You'd better memorize the outline of all the islands in the Caribbean.
Welcome back to Cartridge Based Radio. I'm Donald, once again joined by Brad.
Hello!
Brad, we are what some might call the 90s kids who tend to remember things.
Yeah, that's a title that just flows right off the tongue. But we are of similar age. I think you're maybe a year and a half younger than I am. We both came of age in the 90s. We're kind of bridging that gap between Generation X and the Millennials a little bit. I don't know if you identify with either of those generations, but I find them both to be foreign and terrifying. Today we're going to do a show on commercials for games from the 1990s. In order to do this, I watched so many 90s commercials. It was an interesting week for me.
In order for me to do this, I just received many texts from Brad saying, oh no, we might have grown up in the worst time.
Yeah, so, games weren't quite the business back then that they are now, so not as much budget went into marketing. TV commercials weren't as frequent as they are now. Although, watching these, I remembered a lot of these commercials. So, TV commercials for games definitely were a thing that happened. But, not the way it is today. The budgets were a lot smaller. They weren't being run as often, and it was usually on cable. So it was a different time back then.
I did not see many of these because I grew up in a place with no cable. We had over the air. And most of our TV time was just spent watching Robotech.
That's not the worst use of your time.
I know I've seen some of these throughout the years, and my goal is to see if any of these commercials are worse than the Surge commercials.
I almost put a Surge commercial on here just to kind of get into, the feel of things. But some of the commercials are maybe a better example of the time, or they're well-known commercials or whatever. I think we could have some fun going through watching them again and describing them for our audience, and then they can enjoy them too.
Listeners, please do not worry. I will be inserting the audio from these gems right into the show, so you will get to hear, the audio. You won't see the picture, but I will put all these in a playlist, and they'll be in the show notes, so you will be able to, quote-unquote, enjoy these along with us.
Now, one last thing to note is I went through and scouted out the commercials. Donald has not seen almost any of these yet, so, you're going to be getting his on-the-spot reaction to seeing these almost as close to real time as we can do it without making you sit through 30 seconds of silence while we watch a TV commercial. Be ready for that. You're getting the unfiltered version here.
These are going to be my hot takes on the 1990s and marketing.
So we're going to kick things off with one that's, I think, kind of a good way to ease into 1990s marketing. The decade definitely had its own look, its own aesthetic, and this gets into a few of those, and it's a commercial from 1991 that introduced the Super Nintendo into our homes, and it's got a special celebrity surprise. We'll see if you can recognize who it is. This is Super Nintendo, Now You're Playing with Power.
Decide to step up to this kind of power, this kind of challenge, this kind of flying, crashing feeling. When you decide to get serious, there's only one place to come, the games of Super Nintendo. No one else creates this kind of experience, because no one else creates these kinds of games. Now you're playing with power, superpower.
Well, that was a good use of a drive-in theater, I suppose. And also a good use of zooming in on a game console.
Which is important for selling a thing. But to describe it for our folks at home, this dude just kind of wanders into an abandoned drive-in, hooks his Super Nintendo up to it somehow, and then there's a real close cut zoom in of him slamming a cartridge into the Super Nintendo, and all of a sudden he's playing like F-Zero and Zelda, I think, on a drive-in screen, which sounds awesome.
I remember that cord in my Super Nintendo box. It was like, oh, here's the one for the television, here's one for a reel-to-reel projector. Was that the voice of Kane as the narrator from Legacy of Kain?
It might have been, but I don't know if you happen to recognize the guy in the suit jacket and t-shirt that was playing the Super Nintendo for everyone to see.
I looked like, hey, we couldn't get Keanu Reeves, so we got this guy.
So we got Paul Rudd.
That was Paul Rudd?
That's Paul Rudd, and you should recognize him easily enough because he doesn't age. So he looks exactly the same, except his hair looks very stupid and 90s-y.
I don't think he looks exactly the same. He doesn't have the horror of the knowledge that he recorded that TV commercial yet. So it hasn't affected him greatly. If you're going to make an advertisement about you can bring this system home, why would you go for a dystopian...
Just like this abandoned movie theater. It looks like that settlement you get in Fallout that's just like a drive-in that had been bombed with nuclear bombs and abandoned. And that's where like Paul Rudd decides to hook up his Super Nintendo, and there's lightning and like all these dudes just like come in from wherever to watch him play F-Zero.
Yeah, they're hanging on the gate. They're like, oh, Madden looks so good.
It's not even Madden. It's Super Play Action Football. Like, they went all in on Super Play Action Football. They're like, this is going to be like our big seller.
And if there's a lightning storm going on, dear listeners, please don't stand in the middle of an abandoned lot. Don't die while playing your Super Nintendo at a drive-in movie theater. And can you imagine the logistical nightmares of getting audio out of that thing?
Out of like the little tinny speaker. He doesn't have a car. Like, don't you have to like... It's been 20 years at least since I've been at a drive-in. Don't you have to like tune your radio in your car to a certain frequency and then you get audio through the speaker?
Yeah, the later advanced drive-in movie theaters they're like, hey, we could just use people's radios instead of having a little speaker that you hang on the inside of your window.
Right.
And you're like, oh man, Star Wars sounds great.
It sounds like it's being played in a tin can. So
Grand Moff Tarkin's like, you're her. What did he say? Oh, they shot the Death Star. He must have said something about shooting the Death Star.
This is a great kind of starter, though, for the, getting into what marketing of the 90s looked like. Like, it's just, there's a lot of quick cuts. There's some lightning. It looks dystopian. It's kind of dark. Paul Rudd's wearing a trench coat.
A lot of wind machine.
Yeah, a lot of wind machine. So... this is sort of like intro to 90s is how I would describe this commercial.
I have a quick question about this commercial.
Yes.
When you play video games, how often do you bend sideways at the waist and then like twist your shoulders back because you're playing with so much power?
Playing with that much power looks exhausting. Like you're getting a yoga workout while you're playing Mario.
How'd you throw your hip out, son? I was playing the new Zelda. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the typical gamer, especially from that era, that's not like a person who should be like doing a lot of strenuous exercise.
I know when I got my Super Nintendo, I instantly had cool hair like Paul Rudd did in that commercial.
You mean cool for 1991?
Parted down the middle and floofy.
Yes. I'll give him credit. Like, it's Gavin Rossdale 5 years later had that hair, and everybody thought he was just like the sexiest man alive. So Paul Rudd's a real trendsetter. He set the tone for the 90s with the Super Nintendo commercial.
Oddly enough, Gavin Rossdale still has that haircut. All right, so now we've played with power. It was exhilarating.
Yes. We are not watching any of these in chronological order. These are pretty much ordered by 90s-ness.
How 90s was it?
Yeah, pretty much. So this is another one that's, gets into things a little bit more. We had discussed this commercial off air after we recorded a previous episode, but Chrono Trigger was advertised in the United States, which, for an RPG was kind of unheard of. And I saw this commercial like on television. That I didn't find it just in my searches online. I was aware of this commercial. So we've got a commercial for Chrono Trigger that I'm going to show you now, and then we can discuss.
ドリームプロジェクト、ドラゴンボールの鳥山明、ドラゴンクエストの堀井雄二、ファイナルファンタジーの坂口裕信。僕らの夢が今時空を超える。クロノトリガー予約キャンペーン実施中。スクエアソフト新発売。
That commercial has a lot of screens for that game floating through a weird, were we in a clock?
I think so. Yeah, just kind of like this big empty area inside a clock where screens can come flying through.
Basically, the narration was like, this game is super rad.
Yeah, at one point, it's a guy speaking in Japanese, and then it's subtitled with what he's supposed to be saying. And the dialogue is so terrible. It's just like, dig this, new game, it's like butter, which is like a very 90s expression. I don't think that has been used in a very, very long time.
I think we're all grateful for that.
Yeah, like, I think the only time anybody says that anymore is when they're like trying to tell you what the 90s was like. It's like the where's the beef of the following decade.
So the last caption on that, I don't know if it was a poor captioning, but when they're showing the cover of the game, the caption at the bottom of the screen said, word.
Well, yeah, word.
Literally like, word, this game is hot.
Yeah, like they really, really were trying to, get into the whole, like, lingo of the age, I guess. And they're just like, word, dig this.
This feels like it was written by some guys back then who were 30, 35, so closest to our age, who was like, how do the cool kids speak these days? They say word and like butter.
It would be like if we made a commercial where we just showed a bunch of like footage of a game and then we're like, it's lit.
Snap this to your friends.
Make a meme of it.
Yeah, so we've reestablished that we're old.
Yes. That is our takeaway from this show is we're old. In terms of aesthetics, it was mostly just a lot of game footage floating through space. One thing that was notable for kind of a little bit of 90s-ness was just like, there's a lot of text on screen and like it cuts into it and there's like a little bit of like fuzz in between every cut. That's a thing that we're going to see as a kind of a recurring theme through these commercials.
I would like to say there was like 90% more 90s style movie CG than there was actual footage of Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
They were super proud of that clock that they were flying that camera through. They're like, oh crap, we probably should throw some footage of this game on so people know what we're talking about.
They're going to think that it's the clock that's like butter.
Yo, your clock runs like butter. Check out my zipper pants.
Let's go buy some Jinko jeans and drink some Surge.
Oh, it's just two things that you should not do, dear listener.
Oh.
But you could fit like 6 cans of Surge in your Jinko jeans.
Sneak them into a movie theater to watch Mask of Zorro,
Back then, no one would want to talk to you because you're wearing Jinko jeans and like, oh, they don't know they look stupid. And we didn't know. And I don't know from experience about how many cans of Surge you can fit in those pockets. No, that was, I'd say that's the best commercial we've seen so far.
It is better than the other one.
I don't know how Paul Rudd survived that commercial with the way he was contorting himself with that much power flowing through him.
He really looked like his mind was blown by the power of the Super Nintendo.
It's like, this is the most powerful console ever made. And it was for a bit.
So, moving right along, we're going to go on to what I think is probably the best known, most famous game commercial of the 1990s. And it is an ad from 1993 that was announcing the impending release of Mortal Kombat on the home consoles.
Mortal Kombat!
I have this sinking feeling, because that was obviously, was that New York or Chicago?
I couldn't even tell you. It could be a very small city for all we know.
All right, so those are pretty big buildings. So I'm going to say a large metropolitan area. There are rowdy teens running through the street screaming Mortal Kombat, and they did not show the follow-up show where someone leans out a window and goes, "Shut up." A lot of jumping over the camera and trying to look cool in your oversized zipper hoodie.
Yeah, and your flannels tied around your waist. I think probably most of our listeners have seen this commercial. This is the Mortal Kombat commercial where, like, the guy stands in the middle of an like, empty streets somehow. Like, he's in an abandoned city, and he just stands in the middle of an intersection, holds his arms up over his head, and screams, "Mortal Kombat."
Did this commercial come out after the movie?
No, the movie didn't come out for another 2 years.
So the movie lifted the musical stylings of this commercial.
Yeah, that's another big part of this commercial, is that the shouting continues, and then it kind of is interlaced with game footage, and it crescendos into like this like very early 90s techno beat that, you know, is like exactly, if you wanted to stereotype techno, it sounds like this.
I'm going to go ahead and guess everyone listening to this show has seen the Mortal Kombat film and knows exactly what we're talking about.
More than likely.
The big fight at the end where it's like, yeah, techno fits in this world perfectly. Now, did I see this incorrectly? Because I'm going to go ahead and assume you've watched these commercials more than one time.
Yeah.
When they show the fatality where it knocks you down into the pit,
yeah,
does it cut to a kid laying like spread eagle in the middle of the intersection to show just how brutal that hit was, that it killed him in real life? And they didn't show anyone actually physically interacting with one of the consoles that play this game. It's like an early flash mob of kids yelling Mortal Kombat in an intersection.
You know, I mean, my favorite thing about this is really just that, you know, they try to make it look like they're, I don't know, they're inciting a riot or something by shouting Mortal Kombat in the street. Because it's like the street's empty, they shout, and then like people come out, but it doesn't have quite like that urgency. Like, it looks like it's just a crowd of people like getting ready to like get on the subway. Like, they're just all together and walking somewhere, but, you know, they're not like, they're yelling Mortal Kombat, let's, you know, tear down a building.
It's like the excitement for this Mortal Kombat fight got interrupted by lawyers off camera saying, "Oh, okay, we have insurance concerns, so you guys can't throw punches. You can't even act aggressive towards each other. Just kind of walk in a nice line, and we'll speed it up later."
I think they actually probably just like took footage like after the crew and the cast was going home, and they're like, "Oh, they're all leaving together. Let's just film that, and we'll pretend that it's like them like rushing to the scene."
I think the pitch for this commercial was someone said, "Hey, what happens when teens get drunk and yell Mortal Kombat?" Yeah, I mean, it's classic. I do remember that one. I think I once saw it in a movie theater, if I'm remembering correctly.
I mean, it's possible, especially if you saw the Mortal Kombat movie in the theaters. Maybe they were just like, "Hey, remember 2 years ago when this game came out? It's still cool."
Yes, the game was still cool. The film was right. Now, I'm not sure if the film was cool.
Now, the question I have for you is, you know, you've had plenty of game releases that you were excited for. Have you ever once been so excited for like an upcoming game that you actually like stood in an intersection and screamed the name of the game out as loud as you could?
I don't think anything in my entire life has excited me enough to stand in an intersection and scream about it. Because I'm sure a policeman would come by and just hit me with a club and be like, "You're disturbing the peace."
I don't know, man. That city looks abandoned other than like teenagers that are excited about Mortal Kombat that show up after people start yelling. Like, otherwise, it is a deserted city.
It's probably Detroit then, right?
I mean, back then, maybe not. You know, probably... I think it was probably some small city that, you know, it took like 10 minutes for them to clear this one intersection in Dayton, Ohio. And then they're just like, "Scream Mortal Kombat as loud as you can."
The funny thing is, all that audio was added in later, so there is a cut of this commercial somewhere with preteens like, "Mortal Kombat!" Why was everyone trying to pose like they were on the cover of a 90s grunge album? Like, get down so you're looking down at the camera and then, like, cross your arms in front of you and look tough.
Yeah, and then, like, put your hand over the camera because, like, it's the 90s and we're very anti-authority.
And there's a cameraman who's like, don't touch that.
I don't care what you tell me to do.
You're not getting paid. Oh, I was going to buy Mortal Kombat with this money. Because they probably did not give those kids a free copy.
So, moving on to the next thing, we're going to up the 90s-ness a little bit here. This is actually a commercial from my hometown. This was a more or less local video game chain that was called Zappers, and it was tied to a movie rental store. The same company owned both, so like you would go to Video Factory and there'd be like a Zappers inside the movie rental place, kind of like in a back corner. This, as far as I know, wasn't like a national chain. I think it was extremely regional. I don't think it was like left like the Western New York State area. I could be wrong. We could get like 10 emails tomorrow being like, I lived in Florida and we had Zappers everywhere. But as far as I remember, it was like just like a upstate New York thing.
So everything I know about where you come from, I've learned from this show. So I'm about to get a peek inside like the local TV window is what you're telling me.
Yeah, and this commercial is great because it's got like some real 90s look to it, but more importantly, it's got like that like local commercial low budget look to it. So this is an ad for the game retail chain Zappers.
Zappers, the world of electronic games.
Did you know that Zappers carries not only new but used games? Why buy one new game when you can probably buy a couple of used games for the same amount? We're talking bargains here.
Zappers, serious games.
Okay, so you're saying, where can I get the money for these used games? Well, Zappers is ready to buy your old games so that you may have ready cash to buy new old games. It's called stimulating the economy through video games. Is it just me or does this make sense?
Zappers, stop.
I feel as confused as that dog looked.
Okay, so since probably no one has seen this commercial outside of like a few friends of mine,
It's bad.
this commercial, yeah, this is a very 90s commercial. It starts with like showing a guy on a black and white monitor. He has an accent for some reason. He has like this vaguely European accent. I don't know why. You're from upstate New York. But he's like, Zappers, a world of games. And then like it cuts to like footage of a guy like walking through the store. And this guy, man, I mean, I don't even know how to describe it exactly. Like, this looks like Kevin Smith's cousin who abducts children.
This commercial has a very, if you send your kids to Zappers, they ain't coming back.
Like, this guy, look out for this guy. He's wearing like a dirty trench coat, sunglasses. He's talking directly to the camera. He's very aggressive. I think at one point he refers to you as Pally Boy.
And the guy behind the counter who tells you he has ready cash for your old games, he's like, and your old games, you just drop them off in the van behind the store.
At one point, it cuts back to the guy on the monitor, and it's zoomed in so that like you only see half his face, and it's off center. And then it puts some text up on the screen. Like, it is super, super 90s.
The guy who was at the beginning, then real zoomed in, I feel like someone said, hey, do you know what people from New Jersey sound like? And he's like, I'm from Great Britain. They're like, that's perfect. Just pretend you're from New Jersey. And as I mentioned before, there's a dog in there who's like, he's telling the dog about stimulating the economy through video games.
Yeah.
You don't tell a dog that. They don't understand.
Yeah, our trench coat abductor guy is like telling a dog that, you know, why is this so hard to understand? There's another scene where it shows like a kid like trading his games in at Zappers, and like as the guy at the counter is handing him money, like he turns to the camera and does like these wiggly eyebrows, and it's like, he doesn't know what I did with these games.
These games were not in my pants, I swear, young man. It looks like every generic video game store at that time. And you forget how big those Genesis game boxes were until you see someone holding like two. You're like, oh man, they have so many games. No, they have 2.
He's going to have hand cramps from carrying 2 games.
I mean, you could hold like 9 cartridges, or you could hold 2 boxes with cartridges in them. It's an easy choice. That commercial was bad.
Yes, that was a really bad commercial. They kept showing Trenchcoat Abductor Guy in like all kinds of different settings. Like he's in the store, then he's like in front of like footage from a game of some explosions, and he just like tosses boxes up over his shoulder. Then he's like in an empty room with a blackboard, and then he's talking to a dog. It was a style that you would see like in music videos from that time a lot. It's just like a lot of cuts to like all these different locations. You know, it captures the look well, but it's also like just visually confusing and probably not great for an advertisement.
And he had a different Zappers shirt on each time. It's probably so when the people described him to the police, the shirt was always different. So were you ever like, Mom, take me to Zappers. I have all these Genesis games I want to trade. She's like, Bradley, we do not go to Zappers ever. Remember Timmy who lived down the street? Yeah, he moved to Wisconsin. No, he went to Zappers.
He said if I got in his van, I could pet the dog that he was talking to in the commercial.
The dog looks at you with help me eyes. I mean, I'm sure every region had bad commercials, but that one just has the arcade you weren't supposed to go to vibe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that guy was definitely in the arcade you weren't supposed to go to.
Wow, can we just kind of move on? Because I feel dirty after that one.
All right, so now that we've warmed up a bit, I am about to hit you with some peak 90s. Right around 1994, 1995, the Super Nintendo had been out for a while. Nintendo had the more popular, successful, better system, but they had a little bit of an issue that it was still seen as kind of for a younger audience, and teens had gone to Genesis, and Genesis was like the cool system. And in order to kind of combat this perception, Nintendo started a marketing campaign called Play It Loud in 1994. And honestly, I could have done our whole playlist just with commercials from the Play It Loud campaign. They are so painfully 90s. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you 2 of them that are basically, they're pretty much the same commercial. So you're going to get a minute and a half of what I can only describe as peak 90s.
No running, no spitting, no loud music, no skateboarding, no shouting, no gum chewing. Keep off the grass. Do not feed the animals. Have a nice day.
We want to be free. We want to do what we want to do. We want to have a good time. And that's what we're going to do.
I think it's every parent's dream, maybe, to have a doctor in the family.
Go forth and thrash!
So, let's break down just how 90s this commercial is.
Okay, first you start off with a police officer warning you the dangers of playing the video games.
Yes, but it's 1994 and we hate authority, so screw that police officer, man.
What we need to do is have a grunge concert where we stand around holding our boom boxes and skateboarding in basements
while wearing like our winter beanie hats and our flannels.
I feel like it's someone said, hey, I went to Seattle for a weekend, and this is what Seattle is like all the time. Kurt Cobain plays Super Nintendo with you and skateboards.
There is so much going on in these commercials. The Butthole Surfers do the two different songs. We watched 2 commercials from this, and it's 2 different Butthole Surfers songs. And both are just like the 90s-est song that I've ever heard. And my favorite part about this soundtrack is that for a commercial that's trying to get across like how edgy and extreme the Super Nintendo is, they censored the word hell in the lyrics.
Whoa, Brad.
Yeah, I know. I just said hell on the show, and hopefully it won't mess with our family-friendly rating. We won't get that explicit tag.
They were edge lords, but they're like, we have to reel this back in because there was people trying to make a lot of money by exploiting the angst of the 90s teens who wanted to give the world a wedgie.
And fight earwax. That was the strangest part. The one part, like, it just cuts to like this like weird background and like some text pops up and it says fight earwax.
It looked straight up like 80s MTV like interludes between the songs where they had the weird animations.
Yeah.
But it said fight earwax. And once again, this is someone who was probably our age back then saying, I know how to get the teens' attention. They like the MTVs from the 80s and they hate earwax.
They also love Beavis and Butthead, who I think made an appearance in both commercials.
But was that like advertising for the Beavis and Butthead game, or did they just go to MTV and say, hey, can we have a picture of Beavis and Butthead?
I think it was both. They're just like, what is gonna make us look really cool right now? And they're like, we should put in like just the title screen from that Beavis and Butthead game so that everybody knows how hip we are. There's like a guy like just like doing kung fu by himself in an alleyway with some graffiti behind him.
Oh, come on. What part of the 90s did you not pretend to do kung fu when no one was looking? Yeah, you can't say you didn't.
They graffiti Mario onto a wall and Kirby. They give him a gold medal? Like, that's, like, super extreme?
There was a guy who kicked a fence.
Fences are mainstream, man, and I'm alternative.
Some cop was like, don't kick that fence. He's like, I'm sorry, officer.
Just so many baggy jeans and flannel shirts in these commercials. It is.
And like 90s grunge hair. A lot of that. Like I can't even see the screen because my bangs are hanging over in my eyes.
I think the best part of this commercial is it cuts constantly because, you know, this is like the MTV short attention span. 2 seconds and we cut to a different shot kind of thing. There's one shot of like a bunch of kids like running into a living room to play their Super Nintendos, and the one just like jumps over the back of the couch and lays down on it. It's like extreme couch laying on-ing.
You know what I did not notice a lot of in that commercial was video games.
They show a couple of they don't show a lot of games I'd want to play. You know, in keeping with the editing style, when they do show a game, they show it for half a second. So you see like a smidge of Street Fighter 2. You see a tiny bit of, I think Mario's in there at one point. It's a lot of Street Fighter. Super Punch-Out is in there. That's in between like screens that just say be loud and give the world a wedgie.
I did enjoy the part where someone slapped a play it loud ad on the back of someone in a suit, but it was put on with electrical tape on 2 corners. How do you slap something on someone's back and then tape it in 2 corners?
That is like some mad, like, sticking it to the man skills right there. Like, that guy's just gonna, like, get to his boring corporate office job and be totally unaware that he has a sign on his back that says, play it loud.
And everyone will be like, should we tell Bob that he wants us to play it loud, or should we play it loud on our boombox? That boombox was like 6 times the size of that kid. He's like, I can't go anywhere with you guys. I'm holding this boombox and I just bought it and I'm stuck in the parking lot. I'm sorry.
This took me 700 D batteries to get running.
It plays half a cassette and dies.
I mean, this was the mid-90s. It probably had a CD player in it that would skip anytime you like thought about moving the boombox.
And you're like, I should have just got one with a tape drive in it. It would be so much better. But CDs, man, that was terrible.
Oh yeah. I didn't pick these out because they're awesome commercials.
I mean, you'd probably be hard hard-pressed to find something from the 90s that was awesome in the TV commercial department.
All right, so moving right along. Now that you've watched like 5 commercials from this time period, and you kind of got a feel for like what the culture was at the time, what the aesthetic was, how people acted, and like how they tried to market things to make them look cool, you kind of have a feel for what the 90s were. So now I'm going to show you a commercial that, believe it or not, aired in 1993.
Game over? No way! Because we got Game Genie! We tell you when it's over. With Game Genie, I decide how many lives I get. I use it when I want to live forever. Play to the end and win. Maybe I want to start on level 15. No problemo! It makes cool games like Street Fighter 2 more exciting. Less frustrating! With Game Genie, it ain't over. So we say it's over. Excellent!
Game Genie for NES, Super NES, Sega Genesis, and Game Boy. Codes from many popular games, each sold separately.
I want to invent a time machine, go back in time, and kick someone in the junk for thinking that one up.
I would say that if you did invent a time machine and went back to that time, you should probably grab that commercial and take it back with you like another 7 or 8 years. Because that is a very, very incredibly 80s commercial that came out in 1993. Like, Nirvana was a thing. Alternative was a thing. MTV had videos full of, like, you know, grunge bands and flannels and depression. And then you got these guys. It's like 2 surfer dudes on a couch, and they're just like, we're gonna get a Game Genie, dude!
No way! And then they do, like, the finger tickle thing from Wayne's World. One guy gets on his knees and plays invisible air guitar.
There are so many, like, little guitar samples mixed into this commercial. I mean, this commercial was filmed in 1986 and, like, put in a vault and then, like, just interlaced with Street Fighter 2 footage. I'm positive of that because this looks so out of place with the time period.
I like how it said use it with Street Fighter 2, but then doesn't inform you in any way how it interacts with Street Fighter 2, and then shows not a video game, that actually one that was made, and he's like, I'm gonna start on level 15, but it looks like Zelda's game over screen. Like NES Zelda. One guy said he is gonna use the Game Genie to live forever.
I don't think he means in the game either, dude.
No, I don't. I have a feeling like he ended in some sort of like drug house, gripping his Game Genie, mumbling, I'm gonna live forever, and then just slipped quietly into that good night.
Well, his friend is like, no way!
Extreme death! Woo!
It looks like somebody saw Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure for the first time, like 6 years after it had come out, and they're like, we need to do a commercial that's just that, but with like 2 guys that we just like found off the street.
I enjoyed the part where at the end they drew in like the horrible 90s electrical special effect that all the movies use, but going up their hair. Oh, I'm sorry, our product electrocuted you while you were trying to use it.
Yeah, that's bad. You shouldn't advertise that. You know, when I first saw this commercial, the first thing I thought was, you know, that this was the same footage they used for the original Game Genie. And then they just, like, spliced in some Super Nintendo footage. But it's not. Like, they're holding Super Nintendo controllers. They hold up the boxes, and it's like the Genesis and the Super Nintendo Game Genies. This was a commercial that just is out of time. It feels like it's from a different era.
I can explain how this commercial came to be.
Okay.
I bet you a marketing person looked at the NES commercial and said, this will work, just reshoot this exact one with the Super Nintendo.
Probably.
It's gotta be, because I would have guessed that was like 84, 85.
Yeah, I might have put it a couple years later, but like this is just like 1980s California surfer dudes like advertising the Game Genie because it's radical, dude.
Yeah, they didn't know that the country's mood had moved up the West Coast into the greater Seattle area.
Yeah, and that, you know, partying on was not really the way of things. It was, you know, like be depressed and angsty.
I feel like those guys went on to in life to write, Dude, Where's My Car?
You know, and the ironic thing is, like, the Game Genie is basically just, like, a thing that kind of hacks your games and lets you cheat at them. Like, there's nothing more, like, the man says I only get 3 lives, but I say I get 10. Like, it could be a very, very, like, 90s kind of thing. You know, like, stick it to the man. But they went in this Bill and Ted direction instead.
Let's make a knockoff Bill and Ted advertisement about a product that hardly worked. Oh, okay. That was great. What next on this smorgasbord of pain do you have for me?
We've only got a couple left. We are going to look at an advertisement for the Sega CD.
Hey! You still don't have a Sega CD? Huh? What are you waiting for? Nintendo to make one? You have seen the games, right? Wrong answer, man. Show 'em! Want to see more?
Oh! I had forgotten about the Sega thing. I don't know if I forgot or I had spent years repressing it. That commercial was so extreme. The first thing it did is establish as people who like video games are dumb and can't form sentences. Who was on the TV?
I don't know if that's somebody we were supposed to recognize or not. He seemed a little familiar. For those of you at home that are not watching these commercials along with us, it's a teenager in his chair looking at his TV, and a guy comes on the TV and he's yelling right at the dude. And he's like, why don't you have a Sega CD yet?
Are you waiting for Nintendo to make one? Oh, sick burn!
Yeah, I'm sure Nintendo was just like, oh no! My favorite part about this commercial is that the angry man in the TV that's yelling at the teenager is like, you have seen the games, right? And then when the kid's like, no.
He does not say no, Brad. He goes,
Yeah, he doesn't actually speak any words, does he?
He just makes grunting noises and, like, weird faces. And then they blow smoke out of the TV, and it's so extreme that you see his skeleton.
Yes. They punish this kid by making him watch footage of Sega CD games. Like, he gives the wrong answer, and they're like, now you have to watch Sega CD footage.
It's like, remember that boxing game where you picked your moves and hoped it played the correct video? I had a Sega CD, and not once did I get plastered to the back wall from its awesomeness.
Yeah, well, I guess you weren't playing the right games.
I mean, I don't know how I feel about that commercial. It was trying to display how extreme it was, and maybe that worked, but if a man started yelling at me and threatened to make me watch, like,
Sega CD games,
yeah, I'd be like, I'm going to turn off the TV now. And he's, oh, no, turn it off. When you turn off the TV, I die. It's like, okay, goodbye.
Serves you right, man.
But that Sega thing, I seriously had forgotten that they thought that was cool. I would like to know the genesis, no pun intended, of that Sega.
Yeah, for those of you who didn't see Sega advertising back when that was a thing, they ended... And this went on for about 10 years. They would end all their commercials with, like, someone staring at the screen and just screaming in a weird voice, Sega!
Yeah, it's like if you said it through your nostrils and out the side of your mouth at the same time, you're like, Sega!
I watched so many commercials for Sega products, and, you know, they never got away from this. The Saturn ones would have, like, where the logo for the Saturn had, like, a big blue ball in it, because apparently that's what Sega thought Saturn looked like, despite space footage indicating it's not a big blue thing. But the Saturn logo had a big blue ball surrounded by an S, and then, like, the blue ball would grow a face and yell Sega at you at the end of every Saturn commercial.
It was special.
Yeah, I went with this one. I spared you the Fighting Vipers commercial where it's just like a bunch of people in a mosh pit at like some grunge concert and then interlaced with Fighting Vipers footage.
What do you mean you spared me? That sounds so rad.
Yeah, I mean, you know, generic 90s music and moshing in an empty warehouse.
I think we've discussed Fighting Vipers before, and nothing attached to Fighting Vipers could be cool whatsoever. It's impossible.
Yes.
That commercial, I would put it like at the bottom of the quality rung. The Game Genie commercial was far superior to that. I thought that wasn't going to be beat. And then instantly you're like, oh yeah? Want to see a teen skeleton get singed off him with the awesomeness of the Sega CD?
While his TV yells at him.
Like, the only people who thought the Sega CD was just amazingly cool was Sega.
You know, I'm not sure if they were trying to, like, make the Sega CD look cool or just, like, make you afraid that, like, a guy was just going to get on your TV and yell at you until you bought one. You know, maybe people bought them preemptively. They're like, I don't want to see that guy. He seemed pretty mad.
Yeah. Like, he's gonna show up on my TV and scream at me until I spend $300 that I don't have. Because look at my apartment, man, in my TV. What part of this apartment screams, I have the money to afford this system?
Yeah, this kid's apartment is like one room that's almost, there's just a chair in the middle of the room, and he's got like a fishbowl on a table next to him and a couple of lamps, and other than that, the room is completely empty.
The secret to that commercial is that kid was stoned off his ass. Okay, can you move us on to something better than, I mean, it's really going to be easy to move on to something better than that.
Well, we've only got 2 left, but we've looked at what Nintendo was putting out during this time. We looked at what Sega was doing during this time. We're going to take a look at the PlayStation, which was, you know, like a legitimately, like, cross-cultural, made video games cool again kind of console, but even they missed the mark at times. So, here's a commercial from 96, I believe.
Crash test dummy. Any volunteers? You are ready!
I was in fact not ready.
Oh, so this was a commercial for Destruction Derby, which is one of my favorite games, you know, for not being like anything. It's like one of my favorite bad games, I guess is the way I would put it. And this was something I saw in a lot of these commercials is they take game footage and they just kind of interweave it with like generic stock footage of whatever. So you'll get like 2 seconds of like video game cars crashing into each other and then like a cartoon of a guy like driving a car. Or like some people on a bus like getting knocked around.
I would say out of everything we've watched, that was the least offensive to my eyeballs. Because I saw what they were going for. Oh, look, this is so crazy that we can't show you it all because it'll blow your mind. But the music is what got me. It's just this thumping bass drum over and over and over. Maybe PlayStation was like, we really have to grab this advertising by the loins and yank it into the impending 00s.
You know, one thing that this commercial has a lot of that I saw in a lot of commercials from this time period is just like text up on the screen. You know, it's just, you'll see like some footage of the game and it'll just flash like crash dummies wanted and a lot of other stuff. And then like the whole like marketing campaign is like this like you are not ready theme. So, like, at the end, it just flashes, like, the letters, like, you are, and then it flashes not, and then it just flashes a red E. And then it shows, like, a PlayStation that's, like, I don't know, in some abandoned, dirty factory. It looks like it's in Silent Hill somehow.
Why was 90s advertising take our nice product and go throw it in a dirt lot and take a photo of it?
Because the 90s was dirty and grungy, man.
Is that what they were trying to say? Like, if you have this, you're just going to throw it out in the lawn because you're a dirt boy.
Living in a house is for the man. We're alternative. We sit in the dirt and play our PlayStations.
Destruction Derby still looks pretty good.
I love Destruction Derby, and I want us to do a show on it at some point.
Well, that's going to happen now that you've put it out there in the universe. Definitely the least offensive. So apparently PlayStation was trying to grow things up for video games a little. And I mean a little, because that still was painfully 90s.
Yeah, there's still a lot of tropes from this time period showing up in that commercial. It's definitely a product of its era, but it's better. It's mostly game footage. For whatever reason, like I said, they decided to mix in like just some generic, stock footage that they must have found for free off of some file archive. But yeah, it's very 90s, but it is kind of taking a turn towards competent advertising.
I didn't think you could bring it back after that Sega CD ad. So, well done.
Well, I saved the worst for last. We're stepping out of our chosen time frame for this. This is a commercial from the 1980s. It is painfully 1980s. This commercial is kind of infamous. I was a little afraid when I mentioned what it was to you. You were going to be like, oh, everybody knows that commercial. We can't do that one. For those of you who have seen the commercial we're about to talk about, I apologize in advance for reminding you of it. And for those of you who haven't, I apologize for what you're about to see.
Did you see the latest Nintendo newsletter?
Whoa, nice graphics. I'd like to get my hands on that game.
You mean you haven't played it yet? We can play it on my Nintendo Entertainment System. It's The Legend of Zelda, and it's really rad. Those creatures from Ganon are pretty bad. Octoroks, Tektites, Levers, too. But with your help, our hero pulls through. Yeah, go Link. Yeah, get Zelda.
Awesome.
Intense.
The Nintendo Entertainment System. Your parents help you hook it up. The Legend of Zelda sold separate.
All right, that's it. Just shut video games down. We don't deserve nice things. The Zelda Rap.
For those of you who took our warning seriously and just didn't watch this commercial, this is two guys, like two kids, hanging out in their living room on the couch. And the one is like the cool guy, and the other is like this like super nerd. And like the one's like the nerd one is going through a magazine. He's like, check out this Legend of Zelda game. And like the cool one looks at it. He's like, look at these graphics. And then creepily he goes, I'd like to get my hands on that.
I would like to point out that the scenario that is playing out in this commercial is the kid came over, the cool kid, to pick his homework up from the other kid with the promises, I won't shove you in a locker upside down. The nerdy kid was like, check out my magazine. And the other one's like, oh, is this a Playboy? No, it's a Nintendo Power. What's that? And then the nerdy kid starts rapping to the cool kid, which will probably earn him a trip to a locker upside down.
So, yeah, like they start playing Zelda. I think it's the nerdy kid rapping because it sounds more like his voice, but it cuts back to them playing and neither one of them is rapping. So it's like rap just happens when you're playing Zelda. It is the worst rhymes I've ever heard.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and counter your argument and say no one in that commercial was actually rapping. Someone was doing something that someone thought was rapping.
Yeah, I think that's probably a better description of what was happening in that. I guess, like, The Legend of Zelda was so incredibly awesome for the time that it just made you bust out with terrible rhymes.
Did Nintendo not have enough money to, like, consult with someone who knew how the rap game worked?
I think they probably just thought they nailed it.
Yes, so someone who is probably roughly our age at that time, because that is a running theme, was like, nailed it! And they all gave high fives and then did a line of Coke. Because, come on, it was the 80s.
The house that they're hanging out in is, like, super suburban, very, like, upper middle class. Like, they have nice furniture. It's clean. It's well lit. You know, they're giving off the impression that whoever's Nintendo this is, that family has money. You know, which is kind of not really the aesthetic of hip-hop so much. Like, it's usually, like, urban and, you know, grittier. It's not, like, nice homes in the suburbs. With kids that are dressed in button-down shirts.
It's as if someone was taking a different culture and trying to apply it to another one with varying degrees of unsuccess. I'm pretty sure the one kid in the jean jacket came over to try to sell pot to the nerdy kid. I'm like 80% sure that that's true.
I'm 90% sure that the nerdy kid came over to the cool kid in the jean jacket's house to tell him about the Book of Mormon.
Or he's like, Jimmy's coming over. Oh, come on, Mom. Listen, I owe his mom a favor. He's coming over to play. He's bringing his game system. It's like, pretend you're interested. Wow, these graphics are great. I wish I could get my hands on them. And then the kid starts rapping. He's like, oh, man.
What have I done?
The secret ending to that commercial is the nerdy kid gets his face broken.
I'm just like, imagining like this dystopian future where this nerdy kid just like shows up at your house and like starts rapping at you while you try to play video games.
I would rather be with Paul Rudd in the apocalypse playing Super Nintendo in a drive-in theater. That sounds awful.
I would rather cluelessly still be a surfer dude in 1993.
I mean, I hope that cool kid looked into the future and was like, oh, I can give the world a wedgie. And then he just looked at the nerdy kid. He's like, hi, world. What's that mean? And then just yoink.
Now fight earwax.
I didn't know that was a problem. After that crappy rap it is.
I would want more earwax if like this kid just like showed up in my house and started rapping at me badly.
I mean, the honest flow of that commercial would be if it was like me and my friend. If my friend started rapping that, I would have punched him in the mouth. I'm like, shut up. We're playing Zelda. I can't hear the awesome sound effects.
I was always a little curious because when I would play Zelda and like the enemies would come and be like, oh, there's the one that like looks like a crab but has one eye, and there's the one that hops around, and there's the one that digs underground. Like I didn't know they had real names. But like this rapping kid like raps all the names at us.
I mean, this goes back to, once again, people our age trying to speak to a generation that they're way out of touch with. Was like, I know what the kids would like. They would like to rap all the names of the Zelda characters. But then they had to make a call to Japan. They're like, what's the name of the Zelda characters? Because we have no idea. And then they probably workshopped this and got it to what they thought was sounding cool, and then on purpose filmed this commercial.
Yeah, that's the weirdest part. Like, they did this on purpose. Not only that, but when you consider that when it shows the kids playing, neither of them is rapping, it means that they had to record that separately and then, like, add it in. So they had footage without it, and they're like, well, it's okay, but we better get that rap track in here, because that's really going to make this commercial.
They, like, got the nerdy kid in a booth, and they're like, okay, hit it. And he's like, Nintendo's really cool.
Now, here's a question for you. I don't know what year this was. This was probably like 87, because Zelda was around that time. If they had gotten like a genuine, like, accomplished, real hip-hop artist from that time, like if they got like somebody from Run DMC or something, or LL Cool J to do this commercial, would it still be terrible?
Yes.
Okay, so nothing could save this concept.
I don't think anything could save this, because if you get like Run DMC or LL Cool J rapping the name of Zelda creatures, they're gonna get shot. Brad, does this bring the end of my advanced interrogation from you?
Yes.
What we've learned is that commercials from that era were lit. I mean, we gotta keep it going. Thank you for bringing this concept to the group.
Yeah.
I didn't know I could have so much fun looking back at the horrors of what I used to think was cool.
You know, I think the thing that I learned from this is, you know, as you age, and especially when you get to be like in your late 30s like we are, there's sort of this delusion where you think, well, things really haven't changed that much from like when I was a teenager or when I was in my early 20s or whatever. Like, you know, maybe we have like this new invention or two, or, you know, this is different, but overall, like, culture is still pretty much the same. And then like you watch these 90s ads and you're just like, wow, this feels so dated. This is so like out of time. Culture's changed a lot in 20 years, which, you know, sounds obvious, but you kind of go into denial about it when it's the culture that you grew up with.
Yeah, I mean, easily. You think there's no way this is stupid at all. And we just hardcore proved that the 90s were iffy.
We owe both past, future and past generations apologies for what we did in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, we were, what is the word that encapsulates all those kids we saw in those commercials?
Oh, I believe it's not one word, it's a phrase, and that phrase is, it's like butter. Word.
All right, Brad, I think we are done fighting the earwax and making it loud.
All right. I would encourage all our listeners to go out and give the world a wedgie.
Play it loud on the back of some corporate suit, fine tuxedo that he's wearing to work, because apparently that's a thing.
Maybe he was a magician.
Yes, stick it to the magicians.
And whatever you do, don't go into his Zappers.
No. And if you find someone who worked at Zappers, just back away slowly. Usually this is the part where I ask you if you have any final thoughts, but I'm afraid you're going to be like, here's one more commercial to surprise you.
Yeah, I did cut a few from the list that, we could go back and watch if you still wanted to.
I'm super good. I have to go sit down in a dark room and think about my childhood and how I might not have been cool. Well, I know I'm not cool. I would have been the kid rapping, is the sad truth. That was our latest episode of Cartridge Space Radio, I guess, where we watch commercials and talk about video that you can't see. But these will be in the show notes if you want to pop over there and see the horrors of all of them. I might just edit them into one video that flows. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of Cartridge Space Radio. Thank you for joining us. I am Donald, and over there was Brad.
Excellent.
And fight that earwax.
Welcome back to Cartridge Based Radio.